I'm the higher ed AWS head of higher ed and research for ANZO. So I'm delighted to be bringing this session together. And I have with me Leon Young, who is CEO and founder of Cogniss. Cogniss is a company, low-code, no-app builds that supports consumer-facing health applications that are personalized and engaging and have really demonstrated measurable changes in health and behavior. So I'm going to kick off just with a quick sort of overview. And hi, Leon, would you like to sort of give a bit of an explanation as to how your journey's got to this point of founding and working with Cogniss?
Absolutely, and thanks for the invite. And I've got to say, it's great to be here in person today and see all my AWS friends from around the region, some of whom I've only ever seen on the other side of the screen before. So it's good to be here. Yeah. So Cogniss, we market it these days as being a no-code platform built for digital health, but its use cases are much broader than that. It's used across the whole what we term human transformation area. So education, behaviour change, culture change. But from a commercial point of view, we now really laser in on health, although we do support people in other verticals. And by no code, we mean it is truly designed for someone with no programming and no design experience. We productize all of the design components of best practice design for building apps and digital solutions. It's just in place, as well as all the technology. So really, people with no technical or design background are building very, very sophisticated apps on our platform. And how we got to be there, from my perspective, is kind of a lifelong journey, to be honest. I can trace it back to being a kid in high school, someone who was living with ADHD. I didn't know that at the time, but I know that now. And who happened to be in a high school in the 80s that had an early multi-user computer system, and that was really my savior as a kid who was perhaps not fitting in and struggling a little bit in traditional classes, finding this thing that I could do where I could create stuff, and I was kind of a natural at it. Was really exciting. But I noticed that other people didn't find it as easy as I found it. And in fact, when I was in year 10, my year-long project was creating a programming language for non-programmers. So the interest in empowering people into technology goes back a long way. That sort of extended into the 90s, where with a friend I co-founded a business that was called No Code. The joke we always tell is we owned all of the trademarks for the word no code across Europe, the US and Australia. And unfortunately, when we sold the business, we let those go. I wish I still had them. But that was really one of the first no code platforms for creating complex web applications, quite a long way ahead of its time. We sold that in the dot-com crash. And coming out of there, I really felt that I wanted to do something that had a bit broader impact. I love technology. I love being involved in it, but I didn't want to go back to developing accounting software or software for businesses to sell a few more products online. And so I was lucky enough to be able to found an agency inside a large group called 2 and 2, and 2 and 2 specialized in building big budget, complex digital solutions for health, behaviour change and education. We started off very much in the sort of education and corporate behaviour change and gradually sort of moved more into the health area as well, mental health primarily. And we did that for about 10 years. And it was really rewarding in terms of getting to work on these solutions that delivered massive impact, but very frustrating in that they were expensive. They were complex for our customers. It wasn't just for us. You spent a year building something. Usually something that had government funding was the only way to do it. You'd see these products go out, and a few years later, the winds have changed. There's no longer funding to maintain the product, and you see it get switched off. And so after about a decade of that, I sat down with the core team and said, this is just not what this is not delivering the impact that we want. And we combined those two worlds. And we were lucky enough that we had a few customers who we could kind of pre-sell the idea to. So we went into this very long R&D phase. It's started 6 years ago. It was probably more than 5 years of working with paying customers to get to the point where we really had a platform that was broad enough, deep enough, easy enough for anyone to use. And now we're in that sort of commercialization phase of the business, establishing our global headquarters over in the UK and seeing things just really take off in the last few months for us.
Excellent. I didn't sort of share, although we've talked before, Leon, about my background. Before AWS, I was in traditional higher ed. I've been there for 20 years. I'm still working out if I've come over to the dark side or come from the dark side. It depends on my audience sometimes. But I think even pre-COVID, but particularly post-COVID, we've seen that education is not just about knowledge retention, and it's not just about cramming for a test and forgetting everything and then moving on, and issues like mental health or whatever keep coming up. So I think, we're really seeing there's more to this holistic education, learning, life than just, as I say, cramming information. And I was looking up, the subject technically of our session is human transformation, as defined sort of SDGs, that sort of thing. And I found a nice definition of that, which I just came across online. Human transformation, an internal shift that brings us in alignment with our highest potential, which I thought was really good.
I haven't seen that one. That's a beautiful
definition. I'll give you that one. I think when you talked about that earlier about, maybe a traditional formal sit down, cram, forget education wouldn't have switched you on personally, given, your interest, etc. And it was interesting. My mum was an early lecturer in computer studies and brought home an early Mac that we played with for hours and hours. So it's interesting, the things that'll switch on. But when you sort of reflect on that notion of human transformation through technology, can you talk a little bit more about the mechanisms that you're able to sort of leverage and bring that through, particularly to achieve that at scale? Because me or you being lucky and stumbling over a computer is great, but 1, 2 people, how can we get that to the populace sort of at scale?
Yeah, that's really what we've spent a lot of time thinking about. And a lot of it is to recognize the diversity that exists within your audience and how you're going to engage different people on the same positive journey. So we see human transfer. We came up with human transformation technology a few years ago to try and describe this area that we were working in, because it didn't really matter whether someone was building an educational solution or a solution to lose weight or to get someone to take a medication that they need to take. It's the same elements that we're thinking about to drive that. And it's to do with that sort of juxtaposition between motivation and effort. So if you are extremely motivated to do something, you'll put a lot of effort in.
Yeah.
A year 12 student who wants to go and study physics is going to nail calculus because they have to, and they'll start late and they'll do what they need to do that. But for a lot of things in life, that level of motivation isn't necessarily there. Now, if you have no motivation to do something, it's pretty impossible to actually get someone to do something, unless there's some way of, sort of really making them. That's not what we're about. But most things in life, we know what we should be doing. We know we should eat better. We know we should get fit. We know we should be, talking to the right doctors, or we know that we need to, maybe we want to learn a language or something like that. It doesn't really matter what it is. You've got that juxtaposition there of effort versus motivation. If your motivation is not at that level that you're going to do anything to get there, then what you need to do is offset that by making the effort easier. So you need to think about how you're going to engage in that process in a frictionless way. So let's say you might be going to France next year. You want to learn some French before you go there. You've got a nice motivation. You want to get a bit of vocabulary before you get there. Not the end of the world if you don't, but you'd like to do it. Enrolling for French classes and doing some formal education probably won't fit in with your work and your family life and everything like that. You might go and do that and you'll drop out after a few weeks, but you could go and download Duolingo. When you've got a few minutes on the train or the bus or whatever, it's very easy for you to jump in and do that. Duolingo is going to personalize that experience to you. It's going to recognize what you like to do and what gets you to do those things. And it's going to put into nice games and make it enjoyable. So you'll jump in and out, and you may not get the same experience you get doing a bachelor's of languages in French, but you'll come away with some vocabulary. That's what we're about. How do we take people on that journey in that hyper-personalized way?
Yeah. That's really interesting. And when we talked earlier, I think we've sort of approached this issue almost from different aspects. I worked in online education, and particularly when I was in the US, I was trying to focus on underrepresented minority students who maybe have struggled with traditional higher ed, and what can you build into an environment as sort of hooks, incentives. And we started to geek out a little bit on some of the intrinsic motivators and the language around that. But I think it's really important, and I think the fact that we're talking about these triggers and motivators to keep people engaged is an essential part of what we're both trying to do there. A little bit on our personal relationship, but you work exclusively with AWS as a partner, and I just wondered if you could talk a little about how that's working out in terms of the strengths and values that you see of this kind of partnership with AWS. We talked a little about privacy, security, etc.
It's been a really interesting journey. I mean, as I said, it's a 6-year process we've been through, and AWS has kind of grown and changed and evolved as we have as well. So when we picked up building on AWS, and I had, my previous company had built on AWS for some years. AWS I would have seen as a utility company. It was a bit like your power company. You went to a website, you subscribed. They had a really cheap way of getting you on and making these services available, and you went and did whatever you wanted to do. In the last particularly 3 to 4 years, AWS from a customer's point of view is completely transformed. So there would not be a week go by that I'm not sitting in front of a screen talking to someone at AWS. And that's across different areas of the business. So on the commercialization side, AWS recognizes that our success is your success. And so we work together as to how to get into particular customers, how to grow accounts, how to land and expand. But then on that technical side, really in the last couple of years, your engineers have started to work more and more closely with ours so that we know the best. They make sure we're applying the best practice around security and privacy at the technical end. And for us, because we're in people building medical products and education products, they're the 2 highest risk areas, and I don't need to point out to anyone what's been on the news in the last couple of months of people's medical information being shared. We know the products we build are going to be targeted. So AWS helps us get the back end and technical side right. And then we have other partners like there's a UK company that we work with called Orca, where we're now building, they help health systems ensure that the apps and services they buy meet all the different standards around the world. So we're now working with them to also productize what our customers do, because we can get all the technology right. AWS and Cogniss can give a customer a really great solution, but if the customer doesn't have good security processes inside their business, the holes are still there. So we're trying to package all that up to make that super easy so that you can roll out your medical app in Germany or in the US or wherever you need to do it.
Yeah. That's interesting. And I'm sort of looking at things from the other side of that. I came on with AWS about a year and a half ago. And my assumption coming in was that, we probably build everything. And we do. There's a lot of product that AWS puts out. But I think the richness in my role and in the implementations that we're doing with higher ed are where we're going in with partners like yourselves and either co-developing or ramping up services that allow us to provide tailored service that is probably beyond us in terms of subject matter expertise, etc. So something like 60-70% of my work, I think, looking forward, is really sort of introducing partners to customers, and that's great. It's sort of matchmaking, and it's really looking for great fits and that sort of thing. So yeah, I think it's really interesting being on this journey. But just to speak to that, map out the next 3, 4, 5 years. What does success look like for Cogniss and you yourself, and what's your vision of sort of this connection with education and health and behavior that you think, at that point I'd be able to go, we did it?
Well, we're not short of ambition. So from day one, what we've been thinking about is that we're only at the start of this human transformation journey through technology. Really just at the cusp. And at the moment, I always pull this out and say, look, this is where the consumer or the patient or the student lives at the moment. It won't be in 5 years. We're seeing IoT and wearables and medical devices and all of these things being rolled out. At the moment, they're being rolled out in very isolated ways. So you get a wearable and you get an app with that wearable and it tells you a bit of information. In the future, there needs to be an ecosystem that brings all these things together. So whatever positive outcome you're trying to drive in someone's life, you can tap into all of those different things and bring them together. We've been talking a lot today about things like mental health, physical health, learning are all interrelated. And you want to drive a lot of the same things. I know if I can get someone to eat right, exercise, and have good social connections, they're less likely to have depression and anxiety. They're also going to achieve more in their educational outcomes. So we're trying to be, I guess, what Salesforce is in the CRM world or what Xero is in the accounting world. We're building a hub, a center where people can bring all these different things in and create solutions that are much deeper, much more meaningful, and much less transactional than just an app that you might use for 6 months. So 3 to 5 years, That's where I want to see us. We're that thing that's facilitating all the other software developers, hardware creators, all the people with those niche skills, and bringing them into one big ecosystem with AWS sitting underneath it. So it's not short on ambition, but we're seeing the pieces come together now.
Question. All right, I think we've got a question in the chat window. I'm not 100% sure about how I can pull that up. I'll give it a go. 1 second. Yep. So a question's come in from Floor. I really like how you address the strategy of lowering the effort required to learn languages, for example, French in my case. What is one way that edtech companies can do that to improve technology adoption for teachers who typically have a very full plate?
Well, apart from the obvious of building on Cogniss, I think edtech companies do have a real struggle here in that, particularly getting cut through with teachers. Teachers have so much on their plate, and taking on more products and evaluating products is really, really difficult. So you have to think. I don't think it matters whether it's an edtech product. I think this you can talk about anyone taking new technology to market. You've got to try and think about how you remove all the friction to people trying out what you do. For us, I can tell you what that journey has been. In the last year, we actually kind of almost didn't go out and sell our product for a while. We raised a little bit of money last year, and we invested it all in building an academy, in improving UX, and doing everything to make it as easy for someone just to try out our product as possible. And I think whatever technology product you're building for whatever market, that's the thing. Make it so easy for them to try it that then they'll want it and they won't want to leave. If you put barriers in place, it's going to be much harder.
I think that's where in our coffee chat we were really starting to overlap, because that's sort of my area of research as well, intrinsic motivators. So and if you think of anything, any app or any new sport that you try, what are the things that get you kind of hooked so that you think, wow, like 2 hours have gone by? The opposite being traditional online learning, particularly where it's like, God, I've only been going 20 minutes and it feels like so what can you buy? And there's quite a big body of knowledge around that I know you yourself and your team really look at. Early wins, immediate corrective feedback, since ultimately, having been a teacher myself, I know that unless I get results, I'm not going to keep going. Right. So, I mean, if it's seen as a clunky technology that's poor to use, that's inefficient, that doesn't really enhance the student experience, I'm done. But if it's something that, I can quickly see how it's empowering, and you mentioned things like language learning, sure. I mean, looking at things like Duolingo, it's very cleverly built. It gives sort of early acknowledgement, early rewards. The timing of reminders is specific, and how much you lose over time. When you haven't done it for a while, you get different reminders. Interesting that you picked French. My French-Canadian wife would be quite pleased if I came back fluent, although I think her and the kids are talking about me behind my back sometimes, so I've got to look into that. But yeah, that's a great question. And I think, that notion, again, we're looking at the research and the technology and traditional education kind of coming together now.
Yeah.
And you mentioned your 3-year goal. I think that's what I'm feeling as well. Now's the time, right? We've cracked a number of eggs with this bloody COVID thing.
Yeah.
And it's made people think about technology and think about potential enhancement in a way that maybe 3 years ago people were just, I can't get to it. We've been given this hellish, in a way, sort of nudge, but it's been a nudge that we can take advantage of. So do you see that yourself?
Yeah, look, absolutely. And it is the time. I mean, in all the areas that we operate in, there is just a shift, just a monumental shift that is happening. You feel like it's just happening right now. And people are actually wanting to, see the rubber hit the road and actually go a bit beyond just doing what we're doing now and having a video conference and thinking about what role does technology really play in driving these outcomes?
Yeah.
For us, we see it at every level. So it's not just about the product that someone builds, but it's also the process of how they build the products. So, for instance, our biggest success has been with researchers in the human research areas in universities, so psychology, medicine, health, neuroscience, things like that.
Yeah.
And those researchers are building digital health interventions, novel new types of digital health interventions, and running studies around them. We support them in doing that. What we're helping them do is reframe how they think the development process should work, and how they create an effective product. So in the past, what would happen is a researcher would come up with an idea for a novel intervention, write a grant application. There'd be 2 paragraphs in there about digital solution. They'd talk to a few people and say, how much money do I need? okay, this much, put it down. And usually what it is they work out all the human resource costs they have and whatever is left up to the limit, that's what goes in for the technology. They get the grant. Okay, now I've got a limited budget. I have to find someone to build it. I can't go over this budget. And they go through this very waterfall process of signing off on an agency or internal developers building something. It's never quite right. There's no budget left to change it. We just have to go for it, run our study. If it's successful, we've spent a year building a product, a year running a study, and then we analyze the results and we publish. Commercialization at the university immediately says, well, it worked. Let's commercialize it. No, okay, it's already 3 years out of date and it was never quite built in this way. Whereas we say to researchers, jump on our product, build your app before you apply for the grant. You're much more likely to get the grant because you completely de-risked it from the grants body's point of view. But also in our environment, you can change anything instantly. So you can sit with some end users around the table and do real collaborative design. Sit there in the interface. I'm going to change how I reward you. I'm going to change what's happening on the dashboard of the app. And the individuals can see that instantly change and tell you what's working, what's not working. And then even when you're out in the field, you can make these changes, see if they work, see if they don't work. So we're encouraging people to do pre-studies, find out what's going to most likely deliver the outcome that you want, so that when you go into that formal ethics-driven study, you can't change anything probably. Yeah, you kind of already know where you're going and what outcome you can expect. Yeah. Excellent. Well, look, I think we're time to wrap, but I think what I've sort of heard through the other discussions and this one, we're here with cloud and access and security and privacy taken care of. We've got apps and app developers, and we've aligned that now with pedagogy and teaching theory that we can really start to make a difference. So I'd love to hear from more of the gang online as to your goals and targets, etc. I believe we're moving into networking or something like that. So I'm going to switch off my health app.